If you're a mid-level to C-suite leader who wants to own your growth and figure out your next small, brave move to achieve your leadership goals, you are in the right place. Welcome to the Small Brave Moves podcast, a weekly deep dive on how to be braver in leadership and in life for exceptional results. I'm your host, Nicole Bianchi, best-selling author, certified master executive coach, NSA certified speaking professional, chief bravery officer, and tough talk expert. If you're ready to become a better, braver, and more authentic leader, let's dive in. Welcome to the Small Brave Moves podcast. Today's guest is no stranger to high-stakes situations. I'm honored to be joined by Melanie Marshall, award-winning speaker, filmmaker, and former BBC journalist who spent 2 decades reporting from some of the most dangerous places on earth. From conflict zones in Afghanistan to political unrest in Tripoli, Mel learned how to lead through chaos, regulate emotions under pressure, and navigate change with what she calls accidental bravery, the kind that sneaks up on you and transforms you. She might not be in a literal war zone, but if you've ever felt like you're under fire at work or life, this conversation is for you. We're diving into leadership, emotional regulation, hope, and the inner work it takes to conquer yourself before you can lead others. Mel, welcome to the podcast. I am excited to welcome to the Small Brave Moves podcast, the Melanie Marshall, fondly called Mel. And I want to just say that I met Mel walking down a dark, cold street in Nashville. It was raining and I had an umbrella and I'm walking about the same pace as this other person is, Mel, with no umbrella. And I was like, okay, she appears to be going the same direction I am. I'm going to offer her a piece of the umbrella. And from that point on, we became fast speaker friends. Mm-hmm. And Mel, you have just lit up my life in so many ways. So I'm excited to have you on the Small Brave Moves podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I would also point out I was wearing antlers, so it made it even braver that you offered me a piece of your umbrella, not knowing me.
I forgot about the antlers. I was assessing whether or not if she kung fu chopped me, if I'd be able to take her, and I thought I could, but I'm not.
It would be a pretty even match. It
would for sure. So Mel, give us a snippet of who you are. And then I'm going to roll with some great questions.
Oh, I'm ready for it. So, I hope I'm ready for it. Look, I spent 20 years of my life mostly in a flak jacket, working for BBC News around the world, Afghanistan to Ukraine to the Middle East, covering stories that I loved, connecting people to the world and the world to people. And you might have found it a little dangerous, but for me, it made me an optimist. And now I am out as a speaker and still as a filmmaker, helping people move through uncertainty, helping people do that with hope and with bravery.
I love that. All right. You have to tell us about this fist fight that you broke up in Tripoli. I need to hear about what this story is.
Yeah, I told you, I said, should I tell this story? Because I've never told this story, not to a non-BBC person. So when Tripoli fell, so Gaddafi, who was the dictator, finally lost his grip, we were all racing to get in. And the team who had been inside by themselves, exhausted, fighting death, had lost the competition between themselves and another broadcaster. Mm-hmm. And this made the mega leader, I don't know a term for that. We call them the IC, but the mega leader, I have another word for them, but I can't say this on the podcast, very cross. It made all the bosses very cross because we had lost. They had this part of our team had nearly died and and they and everyone else had to pull back and stop for the night. Another team belonging to another broadcaster had managed to get in, very dangerous. I mean, a miracle they survived, and that was seen as winning. So when we arrived in town, and then we had very dangerously come in to support them, the person who was above me was making very bad decisions, both for morale and for actual safety.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that they were thinking about was what the bosses above them, who were very far away in London, which, look on a map, not Tripoli.
Yes.
Anyone who's listening or watching, just trust me, far away. They were not thinking about what their job was, which was to be present with the team, take care of the team, and assess how we could win with where we were.
Wow.
And what this led to was us being in a compound for Gaddafi loyalists, which had been abandoned. And we had taken over a couple of I think the best word I could use is like condos, like a Florida kind of condo, but for like I found like silk scarves like hanging from the closet. Like it was that kind of a thing. But no water, no power, nothing. And a team that was absolutely on their knees because they had been there for a week longer than everyone else. What they needed was somebody to say, "Are you okay? What do you need? We're here."
Yeah.
And I was the first person to do that. I came in and said, "We're here. It's okay. We're going to pick up the slack. We're here to take care of you."
Oh.
The big boss came in and started to berate them and take away the prestige projects from them as punishment for losing.
Oh my gosh.
And so you, as somebody who is an expert in leadership and an expert in bravery, they had shown bravery, right?
Yeah.
Extreme bravery.
Right.
And this was the reward. And anyway, I was up on the roof, which it turns out was a bad idea because we didn't know there were still snipers in the area. But like that's part of the job though, right? Like that's just part, like it is.
Right.
So we were up on the roof. I was with the amazing Lise Doucette, who can go live for 24 hours without stopping. I had got her going, and I could hear a bit of a commotion downstairs. And I thought, I should go figure this out. And it's like a tableau of tough guys who are all frozen, except for two men, the mega boss and the correspondent who is exhausted, who had nearly died the day before, who are up in each other's faces, calling each other very bad words.
Ooh.
And I mean, this is actually dangerous to everyone's life. In a situation like that, having two of the most high-profile people break things down like that creates danger to everything. Literally nobody is functioning.
Mm-hmm.
So I know I'm making this sound so much more serious and leadership-y than I intended. I mean, it was really pretty crazy, though, because like you don't do this.
Right.
This is not how you behave.
Right. Right.
And so anyway, I looked around and I had one of those moments which has happened to me so often, where I look around thinking, I wonder who's going to do something about this. And I suddenly was like, oh, it's me. I'm the
chosen one.
I'm the one who's going to do something about this. Yes. And because I looked at one of the guys and I'm thinking, you're much bigger than me. I looked at him and he was like, and so they were just about to swing and I just walked in between the two of them and pushed them apart.
Right. Good move.
Pushed them apart.
Yeah.
And I said to one of them, I said, go outside. And he did. He just walked off into the dark, which, look, it was the better choice.
Yes, yes.
It was walking off into the dark at Gaddafi's compound, but better choice. And the guy who was the mega boss, I just stared him down.
Yeah.
Which was a little like staring down a lion.
Mm-hmm.
But I was just like, not right now. Like, this cannot happen now.
Right.
And without saying a word, he didn't say thank you. He didn't say you're right. He didn't say anything. He walked off into the dark.
Yeah. It sounds like two egos. Very big.
Yeah. Very big egos.
Dark,
and then everybody stood there, totally frozen. And then I said, okay, everybody, here's what we're going to do. And I just gave everybody the next moves. I said, next little moves. Here's the next things we're going to do. And I said to the The team who needed to rest, you're going to rest. These guys, okay, we're getting back into it. The other team, I just gave everyone their marching orders again.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things that you cannot believe is happening until it happens.
Yeah. And so what comes up for me is the mental side of leadership, right? And overlay it with what you're dealing with and the in their mind, the perceived loss of the story or what, you know what I mean? But it's the mental side and not even recognizing the mental side of what the team that you were rallying had been up against and the balance of it, right? And of course, the egos got into play, but the mental side of not just being brave, but leadership, that so many don't invest in their mental side of their growth during their leadership journey. And I see that as a miss.
And it's a total miss, because if you don't have self-regulation, how are you going to lead a team?
Right.
In really difficult times.
Right.
You need them to trust you. And yes, you can lead through fear. See dictators, but you get so much better results when people trust you and lead from their own excellence.
Oh, absolutely.
And, this didn't resolve itself, by the way. This carried on because there was this sense of punishment. And you also forget that people who are excellent at what they do have their own sense of loss when there is an objective that isn't met.
Absolutely.
Right? So are you trying to get them back to a sense of excellence, right? Like, what is your objective with that team? Are you writing them off, or are you trying to get them back to a sense of excellence?
It's interesting. We learn so much from those leaders who don't get it right, right? As we do as the ones who, thank goodness you were there to jump in and get them their mindset reset for just the moment and heading down the path, and that they were heard, right? That they were heard and cared for. More importantly, the third book I'm working on, which I've talked to you about, called Self. This is it's that pursuit of ourself, right? Now, that emotional regulation, not only the emotional regulation, but protecting our energy when we're dealing with some really hard things and when we're in the flow and ease, but we don't do a good job of protecting our energy and our mindsets. And then that can happen, right? Our ego flies out and then you're in the middle of a fist fight.
It's not always easy. I'm not saying I've always done it right. Like, I've had moments where, I've suddenly thought, oh my goodness, wait a second. I tell people this and it's true. One of my nicknames in Iraq was Assad. Like, not after the Syrian dictator, but after Lion, because when I was determined to make something happen, it would happen, right? And
yes.
So I've had to check my own ego too. I've had to be wrong too. And I think it's one of the best things you can learn to do. But what I saw, going back to that living example, was it is amazing what people will do on their own if you have a highly functioning team, which we did in that case. Those were the best of the best.
Wow.
And the day after, this person was trying to punish them still by saying, we're going to make you go to the front line. This was not a team who should have been at the front line at that point, right? They had very narrowly escaped death. They needed time to recover. And instead, you had other highly functioning people who were getting together. We were all getting together because there was no plan. So again, it was like, oh, I guess I'm the plan.
Yeah.
And then you have highly functioning people volunteering and saying, oh, actually, I feel like going to the front line today.
Yeah.
Because they were seeing what needed to happen. And it's like, when you create that space, and I'm not giving myself this credit, I'm giving the other team that credit.
Right.
They were making that space. But it is true, you often learn more from a bad leader than a good one.
Well, I actually have. I have. And I agree with you. We're here, obviously, breaking apart this story. Please know that there are personal stories woven into Conquer Yourself about when I've really not gotten it right. Right. And the other thing I'll tell you about Conquer Yourself is it is a journey that never ends. There is no, I've arrived and I'm my higher self and my future self and the person I want to be all the time. It's like, no. So it's a battle, right? It's a battle that we have to, but part of it is the self-awareness, emotional intelligence to either before, during, or after be able to say like, oh, I didn't get that right, or I didn't show up as my best self, or I didn't control the things I could actually control, which is me. in
Yeah.
the midst of that, right?
And the funny thing is, though, like, talk about holding a grudge. Like, it's like people, and this story has become apocryphal. It's so funny is that other people will now take credit for breaking up that fist fight. So I've actually heard this story repeated back to me.
Well, you've heard it first told
Yeah.
on Small Brave Moves podcast that it is, in fact, the Mel Marshall that broke this fist fight up in Tripoli. So any questions, let us know.
Yeah, thank you. Like, give me the credit here. Give me the credit.
Exactly. We're giving you full credit here, full credit. All right. Another thing I want us to explore is I want to talk about the story that it's the two people tell you you're drunk, lie down story, because it's powerful and it's powerful about the brave conversations.
Oh boy. Yeah. Okay. So we were talking about getting things wrong.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. And thinking I had developed into such an empathetic leader where, look at me, I'm the model. That guy's the bad guy. I'm the good guy, right? Like,
Yes.
no, still getting it wrong. Still will.
Yeah.
So I was based in the Middle East, in Jerusalem, for the last 4 years of my BBC life, which meant we had a fair number of conflicts.
Sure.
Like now it looks like a little mini war. At the time, it felt like quite a big war. But now I'm like, it was nothing. 12 days. Oof, it was nothing. But it was, we were in the middle of a conflict that was, 2 hours of sleep a night and not enough people to cover it.
Yeah.
And very intense. And we get more complaints about our coverage of that than anything else.
Really?
Oh, yeah. More than Brexit, more than anything in America.
Wow.
That's the one. That's the one thing that gets everything coming. So it's very scrutinized. So my tendency, I don't know if you have a tendency, you might be shocked to hear this. I go a little mama bear.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, well, I know it all, so I'm going to decide it all. Right? Like,
Yeah.
I have had 2 hours sleep, so I am in the best possible shape to decide everything.
I do that. I could see
Yeah.
that's a trait I admire of you, but I could see it maybe heading a different direction sometimes.
Yeah. And so here it goes. Here it goes down. So I know this phrase that I've been told, right? It's a Yiddish phrase. If two people tell you you're drunk, lie down. And that's like, even if you haven't had a drink, right?
Yeah.
Which I don't drink anymore. So I am keeping people on track because it's during the pandemic. We can't get any reinforcements in. So it's not like the old days, right? It's covering a war during a pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
One of my staffers, who was not a top performer, let's put it that way.
Okay.
Wasn't somebody you'd put on that list, comes in and sits down. And I'm trying to give kind of like, okay, here's what we're going to do for today. And they tell me, look, feels like you're not being very open to feedback or to ideas.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, Nicole, I thought, well, that's because you don't have good feedback or ideas. Like in my head, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Well, go do some hard work. You're the one who's kind of popping off at 4 every day, while the rest of us are here until midnight.
Yeah.
And so I'll be honest, I sort of dismissed it. And I was giving myself credit for not being rude, but I didn't ask, right? I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
but I didn't get a little pat on the back. I didn't ask a follow-up question.
Oh,
right?
What was that follow-up question you would have asked?
The follow-up question should have been like, what am I missing?
Mm.
Right? What am I missing? What's the impact? What impact is that having on you guys?
Yeah.
Right?
Wow.
That's the fault. That's what I missed.
Yeah. So hearing that feedback from somebody that is not a top performer, had not been really rolling up their sleeves and putting in the work that everybody else had, you immediately discounted it.
I immediately discounted. That's my default, right? Like, it's like, I want to see, when I look and see, if you're not a top performer, but you're a hard worker,
yeah,
my nature is I will give you a lot of latitude, right?
Sure.
As a leader, that's my nature, right?
Sure.
I'll give you a lot of latitude.
Yeah.
And, it's maybe not right, but that's how it is. And same thing, if you're a kind person, you get a lot more latitude. This is, and I've learned to recognize. So The next day, one of my top performers comes in. And because, I had my little war room, what kind of called the war room, right? Where everything's in. So people are coming in and out, and that's where we're having our meetings, and we're coming in and out. And they come in and we're talking about the editorial because they're killing it, right? They're on everything. And then they sit and they're just sitting. And that I caught because it's that sort of, the lean where you can just tell somebody's got something else to say.
Yes. You're making me uncomfortable as you're leaning into me. You see that I'm squirming in my chair.
Yeah, you know what? And that gave me a little of a, uh-oh. I was like, oh boy.
Okay, here we go.
And I was like, what's up? Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
And I could see. And they were like, well, I don't want to bother you because you're working so hard. And I suddenly was like, okay, I had that came through my head. If two people tell you you're drunk, I could suddenly hear, I have put up a barrier now that somebody who is a top performer is worrying about my well-being rather than feeling comfortable telling me what's going on. And so I stopped because also I was in full, like they call it the Marshall Plan, like where it's like where I'm like,
I'm going to remember this as we continue working together. I'm going to remember the Marshall Plan. Okay.
When I get in the Marshall Plan where I'm like, okay, well, so-and-so is going here and then we're bringing the armored back and then this is happening and then boom, boom, boom. And then I'm down to the prime minister. It's like, like there isn't a lot of space made, right? When I'm in that mode, there isn't a lot. And I suddenly was like, okay, I got to stop and make space. So I did. It was like, stop and make space. And without referencing what had happened, I said, tell me what's going on. What's happening? And they let me know that they were feeling that I was on a mission and there wasn't a lot of room for anyone else to feed into the mission. And the difference here was I asked questions, right? I made space and I asked questions. I said, well, what do you think I'm missing? Right? How is that impacting you guys?
Right. And how brave for them to pause and to share something with you that you weren't seeing, right? That it's what's going on conversation that I talk about in 5 Tough Talks, which is, I love to ask the question in the how we work. Like if I'm seeing something you're not seeing, Mel, what's the best way to share that with you? Because it's going to happen at some point in time. And it's going to happen where you're seeing something I'm not seeing. And you're going to let me know that. Well, I want to trust that you have my back and that you're going to let me know that. But giving each other permission early on helps open the door, which you probably did in some way for them to feel comfortable raising this to you.
I think so. And I would also give retroactive credit to the other person for whom it was much braver.
Yeah. It is braver for somebody that's not performing at the level. That is true.
But I would also give them credit for that as well. That in that moment, they saw something and they said it. And then what it required of me was twofold. One, it required me to be like, okay, this is real. Like I don't need to wait. I know this is real. And to be like, all right, yeah, definitely this has happened. And then to acknowledge it, because what I realized is I don't need everybody else to come to me.
Yeah.
If these two have said it, somebody else is feeling it.
Right.
So then the next morning when we had our meeting, I said, look, guys, I know I have been in the Marshall Plan.
I love that we have a name for it.
Yeah. I am sorry if that has made you feel shut down. Or excluded or disrespected.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that, you feel your ideas are brought in. I am still going to make the calls because that is my job.
Yep.
So you might not always like them, but let's make sure that there is enough room here. And if you feel it's not happening, when you come to me, just tell me Marshall Plan.
Oh, that's a good, now it's the code word.
Here's
what I love about the strategic move you made here is acknowledging it and addressing it to the rest of the group and getting it out there, where some people would have heard it and just said, okay, now I've got to do something about it. But that was a very strategic move to go put it out there, let them know, I hear you, I've got it, and thank you.
Yeah. And And still to say, like, look, some of this you're not going to like. Because the truth is, in that kind of a role, in that kind of time, it's not all going to be hearts and flowers. Like,
Right. We've got to make some quick decisions here. And
quick ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You emulate something I talk about in Small Brave Moves, which is that hope-driven mindset. And it's that positive expectation for a better future and the motivation to get to those outcomes, the desired outcomes. And I think about hope really alleviates the tension along the way for us as leaders in our teams, right? And bravery. So when I think of hope-driven and I think of bravery, I think of certainly you, Mel. Give us one piece of advice as leaders who are listening in, who are looking for a little encouragement to make their own small, brave move. What's a piece of advice you would share with them?
Well, I do think the first thing is you have to be grounded in yourself. You have to be. And that is what matters to you. Why, like the why, like, why are you doing it?
Yeah.
And look, that can be different, right? Like if it's stock options, I mean, don't tell me, but it's like, it's don't tell me that, but but I think when you are clear on that point for yourself, it helps you stay more grounded when the craziness of leadership is around you.
Yeah.
So if you're a leader, I think the best thing we can do is be grounded in ourselves, give our teams something that they can work towards with that gives them a little bit of joy as well.
Yeah.
That's why I talk about hope so much, because it's not that we will necessarily get there. It's that if we don't have a sense of it as a positive outcome we might get to, why are we doing this? Why are we bothering?
Yeah. It's interesting you brought in the word joy, because joy is a big word that I really encompass in the work I do. Like for me personally, I want it to bring joy to me, right? It to be something so deeply fulfilling and meaningful, and for my team. And so we actually have on our Friday huddles a joy meter of 1 to 5 and very specific definitions around them. And it's okay to rate yourself below a 5, which 5 is the highest rating, because what it does for us. So at first the first few weeks we're like 5, 5, 5, everything's great. We love each other. And it's like, yep, we're going to have those weeks. And then we had a week where things were really tough. Like we were all putting in a ton of extra hours. We had a lot of deadlines and I could feel a little bit of the tension. And we knew we were going to be surging for that week. And come to the Friday huddle, everybody's at the 5s. And I had to call bullshit. I was, okay, all right. We're putting definitions to this 1 through 5. Otherwise, we're going to default to 5 and not have a real conversation. And the real conversation is it's okay to have off weeks. It's okay to have weeks where now, I told him, I said, if I see a trend of us, a few of us or all of us or however, at this 2 or 3 range, then it's an indicator to me as the leader that we've got to really rethink a few things and to get us back up to that 4 to 5. And again, I'm fine with an off week on a 3, but if there's a pattern, then that's an indicator to us. And it has helped a lot. I think we still have some room to go because I tend to I have a lot of things I want to accomplish.
And what?
I feel like there's a Broadway show where the dancers should come behind me with like fans and like singing a song about this.
Oh my gosh.
But it is, but it's such a good. So I love that you brought the word joy in and at the root of it. And the other thing I want to just highlight is when you talk about it starts with you. I wrote Small Brave Moves was my first book. The second book was 5 Tough Talks, Leading Brave Conversations. And the third one I'm writing is Conquer Yourself. And it's such a deeply personal book that I know we need out in the world, because I know I've learned a lot from doing that and writing it. But what I found is it's hard to make the small, brave moves, and it's hard to lead the brave conversations if I'm not doing the inner work that needs to be done. It's the first part of this, because it is easier to make the small, brave moves, and it's easier to have the brave conversations when we're showing up as our best selves, for sure.
But you know what? I don't think that's how we learn.
Yeah.
I think about being told by one of the bosses. I mean, you start to see why I did leave. Being told by one of the bosses that I was a dinosaur. I mean, I was one of the best filmmakers in the world at that point. I mean, I'm still pretty good. And
Very
I
good.
was off in Afghanistan making a film about maternal mortality, and I didn't know if I had a contract when I came back. You could say, yeah, should I have conquered myself then? Like, yeah, sure. But I don't think that's the process, right?
Yeah.
And then, what I learned from doing those things led me to being a better leader who could have tough conversations.
Yeah.
In some of these roles that I've had leading teams in the Middle East, which is like basically where you send leaders on the kind of, crash course. But then I think right now, it's so interesting you say that about, I've had some tough weeks recently because, this is a new practice for me. This is a new style. And I was like, I'd forgotten to have the joy.
Mhm.
And I'm learning a whole new level of conquering myself now.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's weird. I think this is how we learn.
It is.
Of course, but everybody listen to us and do it the other way around. So,
So you just alluded to, let's get it out here in the open. So Mel Marshall is a keynote speaker. And why don't you tell us a little bit about what you speak on? Because I know you're booking for 2026 and looking to invite aligned opportunities in. So tell us a little bit about what it is you speak on and then how we can find you.
Well, you can find me anywhere in the world, but specifically, if you're looking for me on the internet, you can find me at my website, melaniemarshall.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. Come visit my YouTube. I like to go on there and tell stories about where I've been in the world and what it's taught me. What I talk about is how uncertainty is a constant.
Mm.
And when you become comfortable with that idea, it is not just a threat, it is an opportunity. And that what I've learned in my life is how we can move through it beautifully and take others with us. And that is through bravery. And honestly, I promise you, you're already brave. You just need to see it. And I can help you see it.
Yeah.
And hope is a muscle, my friends. Like, hope is a muscle.
Definitely.
And we can, once you learn to move it, it has an actual outcome on your life, and your life is your life and your business. Yeah. So that's what I talk about.
I love that. Awesome. That's amazing. I would call you an expert, certainly, on uncertainty. And when I think about everything, the word that's not going to change. The uncertainty is going to be the word of the world for the next 5, 10 gazillion years, maybe, right?
There's a quote, I use it in my keynote, but one of my keynotes, there's a quote by Pema Chodron who says, when you realize there is no bottom, the only difference between falling and flying is your perspective.
Oh, wow. I love that. Can I just bring in the Tai? I just learned a new Tai Chi move. Do you do Tai Chi?
No, should I? Let's do it.
Oh my gosh, it's such a good grounding and it helps me with my mindset in the mornings. And one of the moves to center is the flying move. And I have to tell you, when I go through the motions, I will tell you that flying movement just really feels like you can just do anything, right? Like the power and the energy around that is it just helps me launch into a day of, I've got this and I can do, these big things and make these small, brave moves and have these brave conversations that need to happen in the world. So Mel, thank you so much for giving us the gift of your expertise and your wisdom today and sharing some very impactful stories. We appreciate you.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Small Brave Moves podcast. If you're wanting to take this work even deeper, I'm here to help. From engaging in inspirational keynote speeches to transformational coaching and workshops for leaders and teams, page-turning books, online courses, and enlightening leadership development retreats. There are so many ways that we can work together to take your leadership to the next level. For more information, check out the show notes, and let's do this together, one small brave move at a time. See you next week.